Okay, I wanted to start this video off talking about a particular release that Dan Fury here in the vinyl community pointed out to the rest of us. It's this release by Happy Body Slow Brain called Dreams of Water. And it stood out not only because the colored vinyl was interesting, but it had this interesting cover. To get the idea of this Dreams of Water concept across, they decided to make the sleeve actually be filled with this blue water that has all of this glitter inside. So as you manipulate the cover, pull out the records, whatever, the glitter splashes around with the bubbles, and there's a screen print of the band on the front, and as you push down on the sleeve, you can see the record inside, and the glitter just dances around inside. So the idea of putting liquid in a vinyl record sleeve, or the vinyl itself, actually isn't new. Back in the 70s, Walt Disney Productions tried to do this for a movie called The Black Hole, and they wanted this really psychedelic vinyl record that was filled with all these colors, and as you move the record around, it would look like this 60s psychedelic crazy motion, like in 2001 A Space Odyssey or something like that. But unfortunately it leaked, and they couldn't get the leaking to stop, and they abandoned it, so it never actually happened. There were just prototypes that were created. So fast forward a few decades, and Jack White with his Third Man Records label released 16 Saltines with a blue liquid-filled vinyl. Pretty cool. This is videos by Anonymous Brunette, which gave me permission to use this, but I don't actually own a copy of this. They're so limited and so expensive that I just haven't bothered to grab one. If I had gotten one when they came out, maybe. But it's cool to see, but it's just a one color that's kind of swirls around as the record's playing. However, Worthless came out with one for Greener Grass. I showed this in a separate video just because I really enjoyed just watching the liquid move around. So that's all the video is just their music playing, and this cool red and blue liquid moving about, which I think is very close to what the Disney Corporation was actually trying to do with the Black Hole. Very successful, I think. Visually kind of cooler than the Jack White thing, in my opinion, but super, super cool and psychedelic like the band is. And if you look at it really close, by the way, you can see the tracks that you play. So it is a playable record, and it plays just fine. Then, of course, there's the Flaming Lips Heady Fwens, the blood vinyl version, which I've shown in previous videos. It was on Derek Higgins' channel. I've shown it on my channel before. Most of the people in the vinyl community already know about this, and I showed Wayne's video where he sloshes the blood around and explains the project and whose blood is is in the piece. And I show the vertical video, unfortunately, of them inserting the blood into the record. So you guys know about all of that already. But in addition to getting one of these 10 limited edition blood-filled records, I actually got an email from a guy named Oz in Istanbul. So Oz has never been able to get his copy of the blood vinyl, so he's one of the 10 that purchased one of these, but he can't have it shipped overseas, so he asked if I would hold his for him because it's still in the United States. So I actually have 2 copies right now, which is a little bit insane. But in case you haven't seen this before, I thought I'd point out the famous picture of John and Yoko, where what they did for Heady Fwens was cut people out and put them on the cover. So Sean is actually on his dad's body, standing behind his mom, and everybody else on the cover is stuck on a John's body. Unless it's a woman, then it's on Yoko's body. It's very kind of bizarre and creepy when you think about it, but very cool. Well, anyway, my version has a seal on it. It says "Do not break." It's a protective seal, but also a warning to let you know that if you open this, it's your own risk. The blood hasn't been sterilized or anything like that. It's probably a good sticker to have on it. But Oz's release, if you can see here, it doesn't have the sticker. I don't know why there's no seal on his, but it's actually kind of nice because that means while his is in my possession, I can actually take a look inside. And as we suspected, the blood, even though it's been refrigerated, is kind of curdled over time. You can actually see Wayne's signature behind the record if you look really close. But it's gotten kind of gross. So if you didn't think the concept was disgusting enough to begin with, now it's going to be even more gross for you. But it's interesting because the left one actually has gotten kind of brown, but the right one is actually still pretty red. So I'm not sure why one has survived better than the other. It's kind of interesting to see, though. But if I show you details, you can kind of see the blood sloshing behind the grooves in the vinyl. You can see that this is a playable record if you pulled it out of the cover. But this is actually sealed, so you can't get the whole thing out. So all I can do is slosh it around and watch the blood move inside the clear records. But if you can get up really, really close, I don't know if you can see it in the video, but you can actually see each of the separate grooves if you zoom in close enough. And the blood, when it's moving behind it, is very bizarre. And it's actually a really wide, protective, glued area, which is a good thing because you can actually see the blood coming through on the inside about halfway out, and air pockets coming through from the outside in a couple spots. So that really thick, glued area is actually a smart thing to do. The left one that's more brown, it's actually started to dry in spots, so it's actually kind of gooey, and there's dried rubbery sections. I don't know how else to describe it in parts. Whereas the red is still pretty clean. I just want to show you a quick detail here so you can see that it's sealed really well inside and out. So there's plexi on all sides of the record. So the plastic sleeve that's actually holding the vinyl is sealed within this outer thick plexi. So you'd have to shatter this plexi to get to these records, which I'm sure none of the 10 collectors are actually going to do. And every collector that purchased the blood vinyl was given a playable color vinyl copy of the record so they could actually play it, which is nice because I was actually trying to read the dead wax on the clear vinyl, which is inside the clear plexi, and it made it really hard to read. I thought one of them said, "Ask an insect, does he feel pain when he dies?" And I thought maybe one said, "You always want to shave my balls." And sure enough, you look at the color vinyl and it's clear that's what it says. So it's nice to know that they are the exact same pressings inside the plexiglass. And there's some other releases with similar things. There's a reissue of Friday the 13th that came out recently where they claim it's filled with blood, but it's just a blood-colored liquid, but it's still a liquid-filled album. And then there's another band who came out with a nice release this last year. The band's name is Perfect Pussy. The album is Say Yes to Love. But Meredith Graves, the vocalist, apparently collected some of her menstrual blood and they mixed it in with the dye, so the color part of the colored vinyl has blood in it. Eohippus released something called Getting Your Hair Wet with Pee, so it's supposedly urine-colored vinyl, but it has hair pressed into it. And the hair actually is coming out of the record in all sorts of places. I haven't actually played this one. I've got it digitally, so I've listened to it that way, but I'm not sure what to do with all this hair that's coming out of the record in different spots. So more kind of weird, gross stuff. I just want to show this Yachts 7-inch real quick. It's kind of fun because it's called There's a Ghost in the House, and when you remove the sleeve, the outside's actually a translucent sleeve that has the image of the girl, and then as you pull it out, she disappears in this just smoke. So it looks like a ghost. It's kind of a fun little release. But I'm showing this ghost thing before these Ghostbusters reissue, which I've shown before. But I didn't mention this, I don't think, in the last video, that yes, it's the Stay Puft version, so it's kind of spongy and springy like a marshmallow. But the other gimmick in this one is that it actually smells a lot like a marshmallow. There's actually a whole bunch of bands that have released scented vinyl or scented covers. I'm just going to show a handful of them here. This Ringo Death Star actually is supposed to be scented like lilacs. Mine doesn't seem to smell the way other people have described it, so either mine's screwed up or it's not the right one, or the scent just disappeared really fast and was too subtle. Some of these scented ones work really well. This Black Moth Super Rainbow Dandelion Gum, I got one of the first pressings of this one, and the color is pretty cool on it, but the face that's on the front of the cover, where there's a bubble coming out of the mouth, and if you scratch that bubble, it smells exactly like bubble gum. It's uncanny.
I love to fart, love to fart, love to fart. Don't break my heart, break my heart.
So that one works really well. And then I heard about this Drunken, Horny songs in the key of stink that supposedly smelled like poop and stuff like that. So poop and safari poop songs. So I thought this would be interesting. I went ahead and picked it up and started scratching at the cover because I heard, oh, well, it's supposed to smell gross, and scratched the text, and it didn't work. But this blue print is really thick, so I thought, oh, maybe that's it. So there's a piece of poo on the front, so I scratched the poo and nothing, and I thought, oh, well, I guess it doesn't really do anything. Well, one side's labeled fart, and if you look down at the bottom of the label, there's a little sticker on it that's a lot like the dandelion gum one, and if you scratch it, sure enough, it just reeks like a fart. It's really gross. Flip it over, the other side says poop, and you scratch that one and it smells like poop. I don't know if you're supposed to be able to tell the difference between them. I tried to at first to figure out if there's a difference between the fart and the poop, and I gave up because I didn't want to smell it very much. It was really that bad. After showing a handful of records that can't even be played, they're sealed with blood in them in a plexiglass box, or they have hair in them or whatever, I thought I'd talk about this Chop Shop release, A Small Cruel Party, where the record itself, the concept is that it's actually meant to be unplayable. So they released the record as a regular 10-inch record, but in addition to the regular release, they have this one that's chopped in half, so it can't be played. So a completely unplayable record, unless you can find one of the few copies exist out there that haven't been chopped in half. I also recently got this Hummingbird of Death split release. It's this little tiny 3-inch record, which ironically, when it showed up, was cracked. So I can't play this one either, or at least I couldn't play this first one. They were nice enough to send me a clean copy once I told them that this one was broken. So I got this nice, perfect little 3-inch that doesn't have a crack going through it like this one does, but it's these really short tracks. It's a tiny record with 30 seconds of music on each side. Just this crazy fast metal that just, before you know it, the song's done. I don't know if I can shine this in the light correctly so you can see the grooves well, but there's actually music on this thing. And speaking of tiny records, Kid Koala released this 12-bit blues, which actually comes with a tiny flexi. If you buy the CD, you also get the flexi. But the packaging, there's some cardboard pieces in here that if you cut them apart and piece them together, you can build your own record player, which is really nice. So you just kind of pull it apart, you fold it, you kind of piece it all together and put a pin in there for the stylus, and next thing you know, you've got a playable record, which is very cool. And thanks to Dale Hayward for the animation. This is a great little demonstration of what this piece is. And speaking of mini albums, I should probably talk about what Third Man Records Jack White has been doing under some of the labels on some of his records. So for The Dead Weather, Sea of Cowards, there's actually a track hidden underneath the label. It's pressed into the vinyl, and then the label is on top of it, so it's kind of a scratchy sound, and you have to have a turntable that doesn't auto-reject when you get this close to the spindle. But it's kind of a fun little trick to hide a bonus track. Really short, really scratchy, like I said.
Count mile markers between your door and my door.
It's also interesting, if you read the deadwex on the side of this one, it says lies underneath your fingers, which I think is meant to be a hint that there's a track there, in case you didn't notice. And on Lazaretto, Jack White's latest solo album, he did the same thing. There's hidden tracks underneath the label. So once again, if you play the record normally but stick your needle on top of the label, again, it's very scratchy. It's very short, but it's just interesting that they've hidden another track underneath the label. He's done a handful of other crazy things with this record. There are already a bunch of videos online that'll show this better. But one side of the album's nice and shiny. One side's kind of this flat black, so it doesn't have that same gloss that the black vinyl normally has. In the middle of one side, there seems to be all these scratches on the dead wax after that side of the album is over. Depending on which angle you look at it and how the light is hitting it, those seemingly random scratches actually start to assemble themselves. And if you just kind of move the light from your cell phone or something like that around, suddenly you start to see with a pinpoint light that there's kind of this angel-like figure that starts to appear. And if you get it at the right angle while the record's spinning, it's just this cool hologram that appears. And again, depending on the angle, it either can be hard to see or it can look really, really sharp. But of course, in person, it's probably the best effect. It's hard to capture on a camera because when you're at a greater distance, it seems to revolve much more cleanly. And also, if you look at Rush's reissue of 2112, the latest one, there's a hologram on it, and Craig Crawford was nice enough to loan me his record so I could film this. But from one angle, you kind of start to see the scratches, but if you get it just right, especially with a cell phone and a pin light, you get this great hologram of this star. Whoops, if you get too far above it, you really warp it, but it's a great hologram effect of this star that revolves around. Very cool. One on the opposite side is the one that distorts pretty easily, but if you look at the one closest to you from a lower angle, the effect really is quite nice. I showed a whole bunch of animated records in my animation video. You can go back and watch those, but I didn't know about this Larry release at the time, or maybe it came out afterwards, but I picked this one up, so it's another one that has these cool animations as the record spins. If I could go back and edit this one into the other video, I would, because these really should all be in the same video. All the animations should be in the same one. Because there's also an additional release. After Larry, I found another one, this Discoteca Droga soundtrack. It's not as fancy, but there are animations in there. Not as fancy as the sculpture ones, for sure. So I want to talk about this Null release. It's a cool record. It looks cool. It's colored vinyl and all of that fancy stuff. But what I actually really want to talk about is the website. The website has this little kaleidoscope thing with these controls up in the corner, so you can zoom in and out, divide the cell, mutate the whole image. And it's this great visual kaleidoscope, interactive kaleidoscope. So as you scroll over the kaleidoscope, it gets faster and slower. It just changes as you interact with it. And I must have spent, 10 minutes or something just playing around with this when I first discovered it. So it's this unique, interesting experience, which is kind of fun. So I realize it's an online thing, so I suppose listening isn't the same experience, but the interaction is pretty interesting. Even if the vinyl would probably sound much better. And then interaction is taken to a whole new level with this DJ Qbert release, Extraterrestria. Novalia designed this. So you have this piece of cardboard, you just pull it out of the sleeve, and you put an iPhone or an iPad next to it, and on the cardboard there are these buttons, which seem like wouldn't do anything because it's just a piece of cardboard, but there's sample and buttons and loop buttons. There's a left platter and a right platter, crossfader. You can control the left, middle, or the right. There's buttons for queuing, for playing, stopping, syncing, all sorts of stuff. But if you have an iPad or an iPhone, and it's running iOS 8 or later, what it does is it mirrors all of your actions as you interact with the cardboard. So as you scratch the left record, for example, the iPhone scratches at the exact same speed and timing and plays the audio that you would hear if this were a real controller. And there's videos out there that actually show how this trick is done, but it's a really cool interaction. Whereas there actually is this interactive thing that Eno and Hyde did where you can take your iPhone while the record's playing and you get to see these crazy plants and buildings and things that grow out of the record. So you're actually interacting with the vinyl instead of online on a computer. So you can listen to the record itself, watch these things spin around on the record. It's this augmented reality that works really well. If it's spinning fast with the record playing, it's almost too fast to watch. So I kind of like to look at it when it's at a standstill or just barely moving, something like that. The visuals look great and you really get a good chance to see it up close. And again, I mean, with the record playing, it's nice, but it's just spinning so fast that it's hard to catch some of these things. But just a really cool experience. I think it's pretty awesome, but I like to geek out on this kind of stuff. So if you're not interested in those things, maybe it's not a big deal. But it's really cool. I could, show 30 minutes of this and I'd be happy, but I'll just show you a little bit more and then I'll stop and just end this video because I think I'm already over 20 minutes at this point. I might as well mention that the next video might actually change and talk about CDs of all things. So here I am in a vinyl community and I'm thinking about making some videos about CDs. But with the exception of the people in a position to know video that I want to make, I think I'm starting to run out of unusual vinyl, whereas I do have a lot of unusual CDs. So maybe for a while I'll just change things up a little bit. And just watch these buildings bounce around here. I'm just mesmerized by this kind of thing. I love augmented reality apps and stuff like that. I just think these guys have done such an outstanding job with this. So cool. Thanks for watching and subscribing and all of that.